Betty Lou Jensen, she was murdered here. Michael Magoo, he was injured here. Cecilia Shepard, here. David Faraday, here. Darling Farron, here. Brian Hartnell, here. Paul Stein, here.
Feels good to be back in dear old Blighty.
I am confident that together we can ride out the storm.
Whatever. I'll just distract myself with part 2. So, without further ado, let's look at the real story behind Zodiac. By day, Paul Stein was working towards earning his PhD in English. By night, he drove a taxi through some of San Francisco's most dangerous neighborhoods. Paul's life wouldn't end in some back alley or shooting in the Tenderloin, though. At 9:58 p.m., law enforcement received a call from Presidio Heights, an affluent area located amongst the city's signature rolling hills. There, 3 teenagers detailed what they assumed was a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't. Kind of. Paul had taken a bullet to the brain. The culprit was described as white. Don't forget that. White, 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 white. Anywho, the police instructed 2 of their nearest officers to search for a black guy. While doing so, they happened across a white husky man. To law enforcement's credit, they immediately interrogated him. All he claimed to have seen was someone waving a gun up the block. The police had no further questions and allowed the man to vanish as quickly as he appeared. Soon after, the San Francisco Chronicle received another message from Zodiac. This time, however, the envelope it came in contained a portion of Paul's bloody shirt. Any early attempts at criminal profiling were quickly dismissed, as Zodiac was no longer thought to be targeting heterosexual couples. Mentioned briefly in my analysis, the real story behind the assassination of Gianni Versace, criminal profiling hadn't yet become the norm. Beginning in 1976, the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit met with 36 serial killers. Each was interviewed with the intention of solving and preventing future homicides. Criminal profiling isn't tailored to every investigation. Although that doesn't mean it's completely useless. Zodiac's physical description had always remained the same. He was somewhat stocky, wore his hair in a crew, and had thick-rimmed glasses. The overall impression was that of an army veteran, not a perverted weirdo or even a sophisticated genius. Hence why criminal profiling would have served the case well. After all, looks can be deceiving. The San Francisco Chronicle ran their inside scoop on October 15th, 1969. It was riddled with a sense of melodrama by referring to Zodiac as psychotic and a boastful slayer. Anyone with a brain could tell the slasher narrative, provided by you-know-who, was being milked for all it's worth. Oh, God. Things then only got worse when the newspaper published his threat to shoot school children. He didn't, but that's beside the point. What matters is the fact it prompted everyone and their mother to get involved. Tip lines were jam-packed full of sightings. Every caller had to be accounted for. Even astrologers got in on the action by looking to the stars for answers. Zodiac had become the human equivalent of Bigfoot. Everywhere, yet nowhere. A week later, the Oakland Police Department was contacted by someone proclaiming to be Zodiac. He would only give them further information if a famed lawyer of his own choosing appeared on AM San Francisco, a popular talk show hosted by Jim Dunbar. Frickin' believably, Zodiac's second choice agreed to do it. From Muhammad Ali to the Rolling Stones, Melvin Belli represented anyone who was anyone. Now, he was faced with a slightly different task, convincing an unpredictable serial killer to surrender himself. Zodiac followed through on his word and repeatedly called in. He eventually agreed to meet up with Melvin. Not only did Zodiac never show up, but the incessant phone calls weren't from him. They all came from a mental hospital. It's funny to think that such prominent figures could be taken in by a simple crank call. Just goes to show how large his influence was on the media, including Robert Graysmith, a political cartoonist and later an expert on all things relating to Zodiac. Most scripts are divided up into 3 parts. Act 1 sets things up, Act 2 drives the conflict forward, and Act 3 likes to blow shit up, sometimes literally. Whenever filmmakers attempt to shed light on real stories, there's almost always a certain degree of artistic liberty taken. It's challenging to stick to the truth when life doesn't operate like a 3-act structure. Satisfying narratives aren't always guaranteed, which makes it all the more remarkable that something like Zodiac, the film, not the man, could garner such critical acclaim. The screenwriter James Vanderbilt wanted to keep it as accurate as possible and in line with the detail provided in Robert Graysmith's books. This path became solidified once David Fincher hopped on board. He and James spent 18 months researching the case. They interviewed eyewitnesses, family members, politicians, survivors, and more. As a result, the two men's final draft reads less like a script and more like a well-researched Wikipedia page. Anytime the investigation is being extensively worked on or talked about in Zodiac, yellow can be found lingering in the background. It grows brighter and brighter until nothing. The case goes cold. The yellow pillars that once stalked journalists working at the San Francisco Chronicle transform into a dark shade of blue. There's no choice but to move on, at least for the most part. Robert Graysmith holds on to the hue, while the world around him switches over to earthy tones. In If It's Purple, Someone's Gonna Die, The Power of Color in Visual Storytelling, Patti Bellantoni referred to yellow as the contrary color. She went on to explain that the late Dr. Harry Hepner, professor of psychology of advertising at Syracuse University, claimed yellow is the longest remembered and most despised. This is an interesting parallel to the color associated with happiness. Actually, this quality makes yellow a perfect signal for obsession. Steve McQueen, the bored banker looking for a thrill in the Thomas Crown Affair, wears it. So does Tom Ripley, Matt Damon in The Talented Mr. Ripley. Travis Bickle, Robert De Niro, one of the greatest obsessives in film history, drives a saturated yellow cab in Taxi Driver. Even Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy wears it. All of them are, in one way or another, obsessive. When it comes to the boys in blue, my disdain knows no bounds. Why? Gross. Oh my god. What can I say? They might as well be yellow and working for the Springfield Police Department. That being said, this is one of the few investigations I can actually understand, perhaps sympathize with, why it was never solved. If the case occurred 30, 20, heck, even 10 years later, law enforcement may have stood a chance. Take phones as an example. The first call from a handheld cell wasn't made until 1973. 4 years after the investigation began. Zodiac's name popped up all over the Bay Area. Because of that, several different police departments had to step in. Some were a meager 11 miles in distance, whereas others stretched into the hundreds. Therefore, reliable communication was key to their success, which they obviously couldn't obtain. Not to mention, law enforcement had to contend with nosy journalists, who were receiving as much, if not more, evidence as them. In an interview with The Guardian, Robert Graysmith described Zodiac as if he was a catastrophic earthquake. The Zodiac Killer was a unique individual who has become the emblematic serial killer in American mythology. He came out of nowhere in the late 60s and was never apprehended. You guys had Jack the Ripper as a frame of reference, but back then, in San Francisco, we had no idea what to make of someone like this. Zodiac was perverse enough to have his own costumes, his own cryptograms, and ciphers. You had the sense that he was presenting the police with all the evidence they needed to catch him, but they just couldn't crack the code. In the end, the best they could do was to force him to a stalemate. Neither Jack the Ripper nor Zodiac were villainous masterminds. Rather, they were average Joes who committed their attacks in the right place at the right time. Both frustrated law enforcement, possessed a strange hold on the media, and stopped for no rhyme or reason. The film concludes with Robert Graysmith, now dressed in blue, trying to locate Lee Allen, the man who he suspects is responsible for Zodiac's crimes. When Robert finally does, he locks eyes with Lee for what feels like an eternity. This is a callback to, I need to stand there, I need to look him in the eye, and I need to know that it's him. Something Robert had previously uttered in frustration. The entire scene doesn't exactly present itself with a great deal of certainty. It instead acts as a necessary measure for him to move on. I don't know. I don't know how to wrap up my analysis on Zodiac, because the case hasn't exactly wrapped up either. Developments are still occurring as recently as 2020, when David Aranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck cracked a then 51-year-old code. The translated material added nothing new. It did, however, give the investigation a new chance for resolution. Hope that the idea of solving it might no longer be a pipe dream. Time will inevitably catch up. That may seem crazy to some, I know, but it isn't impossible. I'm sure the police never thought they would apprehend the Golden State Killer after a decades-long manhunt. Psychology and technology are progressing faster than many of us realize. Therefore, we must never say never. Burn Betty Lou Jensen, Michael Magoo, Cecilia Shepard, David Faraday, Darling Farron, Brian Hartnell, and Paul Stein's names into our minds. Even after they and/or their families are long gone, the truth could very well be hiding in plain sight. We just need to see it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know. It's taken a long time to do this video. I'm actually going to try to figure that out, how I can get videos out just at a quicker pace than I usually do. If you have any ideas for any upcoming videos related to true crime, let me know in the comment section below. Please like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified about any other videos I do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys!